Hello, Internet. It started with two films, or more precisely, the discussion around two films, Birdman and Boyhood. Several essays, podcasts, etc. have remarked on how both of these films might broadly fall into the genre of white men figuring out how to be themselves, and that this particular genre, broadly speaking, tends to be a bit overdone and also tends to lack people of color or vaginas who possess much in the way of agency. I heard one podcaster say that Boyhood would have been infinitely better, infinitely more interesting if there had been just one change, and that would have been for it to be girlhood. My sister and I watched Boyhood and Birdman. We loved them both. After Birdman, we felt buzzed from the camera, the score, the swooping in and out of surrealism, absurdism, realisticalism. Eventually though, we also talked a bit about the problematicals. Mostly the seeming lack of women with any kind of agency in the story, so therefore, like, the total failure, probably, of the Bechdel test. So I get where some of this flack is coming from, because it's there to be made. But still, I don't know, it bugs me a little. Not because I thought the characterization of these films as being limited in their scope was somehow wrong. Not because I thought that such political or cultural readings of stories are unnecessary. Not because, as it happens, I tend to really enjoy coming-of-age films, whether the characters are 18 or 81. But for other reasons, I think. Because it felt like a lot of critics were criticizing these films not for what they were or what they aspired to be, but for what the critics thought they should have been. Because while criticisms were lobbed at the films for what they weren't, there was a sad lack of alternatives lobbed, of films just as good or better that viewers might seek out. For example, this film, called Girlhood. Because it just bugs me sometimes when a single story, or in this case, two stories, are singled out for cultural criticism. And this doesn't bother me because cultural criticism in and of itself bothered me, because I really love to criticize culture. But because A, often in singling out a story, it feels like a missed opportunity to criticize the culture at large. And B, sometimes in this realm of criticism, it feels like the story, the merit and beauty and characters actually get erased, which is what bothers me with some of the criticism of Birdman and Boyhood, because there are actually a lot of amazing women in these movies whose stories are being told. Sometimes it feels like in an attempt to criticize the overt maleness of these films, the critics are making the same mistakes they feel like the film is making, which is to reduce women to the role of props in the stories of these men. To speak in ridiculously broad terms, there are two ways to criticize stories, from the outside in or the inside out. You can, for example, look at a culture in which a story exists, and within a critique of that culture, zero in on how, more or less, the story you're looking at demonstrates aspects of that larger culture, or you could apply, in a single or combinatorial fashion, one or many theories from a vast array of theoretical framework, and see how that cracks open a new view on the text and presumably the culture at large. This is a ridiculously simplified view of a very complex subject that a lot of my friends partake in, and also Barry Hannah called Death to Joy, but, well, you could also, in contrast, look at a story or film and attempt to determine as best you can its intention, from a close criticism of the thing itself, looking for rhythms, for patterns, for repeated themes, for repeated images, for repeated tropes, for a way in which the ending and the beginning speak to each other, and determine from that study what the story might be trying to say, and how effectively the story uses the tools at its disposal to tell the story it wants to tell. And again, hopefully perhaps throws new light on some aspect of the world. This particular kind of criticism kind of grew out of an opposition to an even older form of criticism, in which you studied stories in the context of the entire history of literature, and also what kind of cigars the author enjoyed during their childhood. Of course, there's not really just two ways of critiquing a work, there's a million and there's one. You can't really approach any work of art any other way besides the outside in, and you can't really expect to understand any work, let alone any person, without trying to find some way to see them from the inside out, see the world through their eyes. It's all impossible, and in so being, it's ridiculous to look at criticism as anything other than an art in and of itself, and that the very best artists practice in such a way that they create new worlds and new ways of seeing the world, showing us how to look at the things we've always seen in a new way. We all have our frames of reference, and the best we can do is expose ourselves to as many frames of reference as possible that hopefully, eventually, we'll learn how to see something other than ourselves. I remember who said it, but what they said was this. Don't you forget about me. Don't you forget about me. Yeah! A couple of things. Hit the button up there to subscribe if you like to subscribe. Hit the like down there if you like the video. And please, what you think about criticizing art from the outside in or the inside out. What you think about Birdman and Boyhood. Let me know in the comments. DTFN.